While hurricane cleanup continues in the Southeast, stories from boots-on-the-ground citizen journalists are helping to demonstrate the proper role of government and how the establishment media and federal government are spinning this as disinformation. Now, there are lots of constitutional lessons here, so let's dive right into today's analysis behind the news, bringing you perspective and solutions you won't get anywhere else. If you're concerned about American independence and freedom, then please watch and take the recommended actions. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and share so we can break through big tech censorship and reach many others. We just assume you stay out of the way and let the good men and women around the mountain and the area foothills take care of our own, because you're nothing more than a boat anchor. Well, that was Sheriff Wright's message to the White House for how FEMA has handled the cleanup in one of the hardest hit areas of North Carolina, Chimney Rock. And he's far from the only critic. Another sheriff, Sheriff Bill Beam, is reported to have gotten so disgusted with FEMA's efforts that he kicked them out of the county and took over the recovery himself. Account after account, survivors are fed up with the lack of response from FEMA and are turning to each other and their fellow Americans. X is filled full of video posts of private helicopters delivering supplies and rescuing survivors. Private equipment is being used to clear roads, build temporary bridges, clean up debris, and recover bodies. Elon Musk donated his Starlink internet provider service to power up cell service in these stricken areas that are largely devoid of any type of operating technology. Reports on X are also being told of FEMA blocking runways with helicopters and halting private planes and helicopters from delivering aid, and of deliberate rotor washing of aid stations. North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson recently said it's time for politicians to stop playing politics and to start taking care of the people. The New York Post reported on a group of special ops vets who formed their own redneck Air Force to deliver aid into the mountains of North Carolina. This disaster has definitely proven without a shadow of doubt FEMA's incompetence and incapability, former Green Beret Adam Smith said, noting that the agency didn't even show up until Thursday, almost a week after the storm that has killed at least 232 people, nearly half of them in the mountainous west of the Tar Heel State. That was by the New York Post. The group has assembled 35 helicopters and has run hundreds of rescue, reconnaissance, and resupply sorties. Again, according to the Post, they're flying in doctors, medicine, generators, fuel, and food. Last week, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas announced that FEMA doesn't have enough funding to last through the hurricane season, although it had spent north of $1.4 billion since the fall of 2022 to address the migrant crisis that, hey, it largely created. Mayorkas assured everyone that it was meeting immediate needs with the money that it had. However, social media is full of first-hand accounts of people that just do not agree. The same government that told you the border was secure is now telling everyone, hey, we got this, when it comes to serving Americans in this disaster. This Orwellian speak that tries to control the narrative based on its own made-up facts is now driving the feds and the establishment media to call the FEMA's failed response as disinformation to those that point it out and suggest that anything contrary to its official narrative is only hampering recovery efforts. Well, if you think that this is merely government covering up its ineptitude, then let me suggest something much bigger is happening. Let me show you a video clip from Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, speaking at the recent 2024 annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Listen carefully.
The top concern for the next 2 years is not conflict or climate. It is disinformation and misinformation. These risks are serious because they limit our ability to tackle the big global challenges we are facing. Changes in our climate and our geopolitical climate. Shifts in our demography and in our technology. Spiraling regional conflicts and intensified geopolitical competition and their impacts on supply chains. This makes the theme of this year's Davos meeting even more relevant: rebuilding trust. This is not a time for conflicts or polarization. This is a time to build trust. This is a time to drive global collaboration more than ever before. This requires immediate and structural responses to match the size of the global challenges. While governments hold many of the levers to deal with the great challenges of our time, business have the innovation, the technology, the talents to deliver the solutions we need, to fight threats like climate change or industrial-scale disinformation.
Her biggest concern is to battle disinformation and misinformation and to reshape the narrative to build trust. Well, in other words, lie directly to you and tell you not to look behind the curtain at those pulling the globalist levers to take control of you and to build world government that strips you of your rights and overall freedom. The EU Commission is the unelected and unaccountable governmental body that proposes the legislation for the EU Parliament and is responsible for executing those laws. It has stripped governing powers from member nations and forced them to pass legislation detrimental to their way of life and contrary to their country's best interest. It is a model of globalism that is being used to help build many other unions, partnerships, and related trade agreements that entangle countries. This would be disastrous to Americans, as it would directly attack and remove the protection of God-given rights, as well as regulate those rights as it sees fit. When the government or the media fact-checks you, it is a deliberate attempt to suppress your free speech. Remember during COVID? Meta's Mark Zuckerberg recently confessed that the Biden administration pressured him to censor critical posts. Many of us had accounts shut down because of this. Those that censored this crucial information, no doubt, cost many of their users their life around the globe. Free speech can be a matter of life or death, as can be placing too much confidence and trust into government. Yet controlling what you can and cannot say equals what you can and cannot believe. Here is former U.S. Senator John Kerry discussing freedom of speech being a hurdle.
The dislike of and anguish over social media is just growing and growing and growing. And it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around any issue. It's really hard to govern today. You can't, there's no, the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact have kind of, been eviscerated to a certain degree. And people go and that people self-select where they go for their news or for their information. And then you just get into a vicious cycle. So it's really, really hard, much harder to build consensus today than at any time in the 45, 50 years I've been involved in this. And there's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change. Now, obviously, there are some people in our country who are prepared to implement change in other ways, and
so
that's
you're
really
questioning
dangerous.
really if democracy can survive unregulated social media.
I think democracies are very challenged right now, and have not proven they can move fast enough or big enough to deal with the challenges that we are facing. And to me, that is part of what this race, this election is all about. Will we break the fever in the United States?
In other words, building consensus to help invoke mob rule is not an option in a country that cherishes and protects free speech, as people know too much and have a God-given right to say and believe as they want. That's quite the stumbling block for those that mean to rule us. They would rather we just fall right in line and not question their facts and their narrative, because they know what's best. Remember the words of UN Undersecretary General for Global Communications, Melissa Fleming? She said that they own the science and think others need to know it too, as she set up a partnership with Google to skew search results in the favor of the global warming hoax. One of the first things to go under tyranny, folks, is free speech. It's no wonder that the Founding Fathers placed it as a top priority in the Bill of Rights, along with freedom of assembly, press, religion, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. The Founders limited government to ensure that we would not be ruled. Rather, we elect our own representatives. So, should we expect the federal government to come to the aid of citizens in need? Well, the short answer is no. Nowhere in the Constitution have the states delegated that power to the federal government. That power is to stay with the states, the people. Of their own free will, the states and the people can give a helping hand, but not the federal government. Well, that sounds a little harsh, doesn't it? Yet it was a farmer who helped explain this concept to his congressman from Tennessee sometime in the 1830s. Davy Crockett, the famous American frontiersman and war hero who died defending the Alamo, served 3 terms as a congressman. In a speech to the U.S. House, he recounted a visit that he had with a constituent during a campaign tour. The farmer told Crockett he would not vote for him again, as Crockett had shown his ignorance of the Constitution by voting to appropriate $20,000 to the victims of a fire in Georgetown. The farmer asked Crockett, where in the Constitution did it authorize him to do so? Well, Crockett had to admit that there was no authorization, but thought it was charitable to do so. The farmer told him the public treasury should only have enough in it to cover the constitutional expenses of the federal government, and that it was not to be used as a charity. He said that if Congress had wanted to give the fire victims charity, then they should have dipped into their own pockets. The public money is not yours to give, he told Crockett. And the congressman admitted that this was a humbling lesson and publicly spoke about his mistake and took his service more seriously. Allowing the government to take on powers it was not constitutionally granted is dangerous, but necessary to install tyranny. America was built on self-reliance, but it wasn't every man for himself. Neighbors helped neighbors, and reliance on a fledgling government was unheard of. Today's heroic efforts by Americans in these disaster zones are indicative of our early roots. Last year, we came out with a self-reliance bookazine that celebrates this American trait. Self-reliance means being prepared and sets you apart from others that are not. And preparedness brings hope. Hope for survival, hope to rebuild lives, as well as hope to help others with the abundance that you've built up. Self-reliance was a cornerstone upon which our founders built this nation. Learn and hone some of the basic skills needed for self-reliance from this bookazine. Check it out in the link below. And given the proven fact that Americans are the most generous people on earth, we recommend doing what you can to help your fellow Americans in these hurricane areas. Sheriffs in the devastated areas in North Carolina are recommending donating to Samaritan's Purse. That link is also below. May those affected by the hurricane be blessed by your generosity and be healed, comforted, and made whole. To work with other patriots in your area to restore the proper role of government and preserve freedom, join the John Birch Society today. I'm Bill Hahn for the John Birch Society, and until next time, educate yourself, educate others, and organize.